Welcome to the On the Edge podcast with your host, Scott Groves.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is Scott Groves here with the On the Edge podcast. And good thing I am recording, which is that would be positive, because if we weren't recording, that'd be a really shitty way to do a podcast and then have it disappear into the ether. But today, my guest is actually a realtor named Michael Bell from the Los Angeles area, Pasadena specifically, who I've worked with, on and off for 15 years. And he wrote this book, which we will put a link into the chat box. We'll zoom it in. Chris will do some type of cool graphic, and it's called Seller Mistakes: What You Were Never Told About Selling Your Home and Why It Should Matter to You. And we're going to get into this, and I want to hear all about your career, and I want to get your hot take on some real estate stuff. But why I'm interviewing you and not one of the other 4,000 agents I have in my database is because on the back of your book in the description, it says, "This book will agitate most agents." And I was like, any agent who wants to start like his crowning achievement, which is his Wall Street Journal bestseller about the mistakes that sellers make when they sell their home, anything that starts with "this will piss off most agents," like, I'm already a fan. So Michael, welcome to the podcast. And I want to hear your backstory, but why don't you lead with this? Why will your book that you give to sellers piss off most real estate agents?
Well, it's funny. It's going to tick them off because the mistakes that most people make when they sell a house are all the things that realtors tell them to do. And the things that realtors tell them to do usually doesn't help the seller. It helps the realtor get leads. And, we all know in your business and my business is all about leads.
All about leads. So give us like one hot take. I'm going to take some notes here so that I don't forget about this. But what's one thing that agents do that is designed for them to either capture business or, highlight themselves, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? What's one thing that agents do that you're like, I don't do that, no one needs to do that? If we're really just getting down to brass tacks, this is a service for the agent, not for the sale of the home. Give me your top 2 or 3 greatest hits list of things people do.
I probably have like 15 or 20 of them. A real super easy one is the real estate sign. Everybody thinks you have to have a real estate sign. The problem with the real estate sign, there's multiple problems with it. First of all, the National Association of Realtors puts out a questionnaire to people that just bought or sold a house. They put out a questionnaire to 160,000 people, and they ask 135 questions on this questionnaire. And they ask what works, what didn't work. How did your agent get the lead? Did they have a sign out there? All these, how many loan officers did you talk to? They ask all this stuff, and the National Association of Realtors puts it out it's like 2 inches thick of all this data. And I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's called the National Association of Realtor Buyer and Seller Survey. It costs a real estate agent $25 if they want it. It's loaded with details. One of the details in there says that you have a 1% chance of selling your house because of a real estate sign.
You probably have more than a 1% chance of getting your house robbed if you have a real estate sign in the front.
Oh, you're making this interview way too easy, man. So this is the thing. There's no stats on how if homes do get robbed. There's no stats about any of that. Nobody really keeps those stats as far as I know. But this is the thing. My clients that decide to have a real estate sign in front, almost all of them wind up having a situation where somebody walks in their backyard, or they're looking into the window when they're having breakfast or something like that. I mean, this just happens all the time. And even if you put a real estate sign that says "for sale" and you have a little sign writer on there that says "by appointment" or "do not disturb" or "do not walk on property" or whatever, even those signs, people don't read. They just think, well, it's probably vacant. What's the big deal? Or I'll just walk back there. And if somebody stops me, I'll just say, well, the realtor told me I could do it, or my real estate agent, or I'm a buyer and I don't have much time. I just want to be able to walk in the backyard before I make an appointment. But it's a big problem. I mean, like I say in the book, the real estate sign doesn't go viral, not like the internet. People don't really shop for real estate by seeing the sign.
Right. And 90% of the people that are going to see it are in your neighborhood who probably already own a house. And I'll be honest, I've been that nosy neighbor who saw a real estate sign go up, and I'm walking my dog. I'm like, let me just peek in the backyard and see. I left my phone at home. Let me just peek in the backyard and see if there's a pool. I wonder if they have a pool. I wonder what they're going to sell for. I wonder if it's staged, right? It's like, I've been that nosy jerk off realtor who, you know, you probably don't want the sign in the yard because I'm gonna be nosy and I'm gonna swing by because that's what I do. But there's a 0% chance I was gonna buy that house. Like I already had a house in the neighborhood. I didn't know anybody that wanted to move in. So yeah, give me one more besides the sign in the yard.
Well, in regarding the sign though, so I've been doing this for almost 30 years. So I'm 54 years old. But when I first started in the industry, the real estate sign just had the brokerage name and a phone number. Nobody had really individual phone numbers back then. And then, as you probably notice now, there's no more of those signs out there. They're all custom made. They're all custom done with the agent's name and their cell phone number because they want to get the lead.
Right.
So other things. So print ads and mailers. Print ads and mailers have about a 1% chance of selling your house. So, but what do print ads and mailers do? They're great for the real estate agent to blanket a neighborhood and tell them the house is for sale. But usually the agent's name is probably, oftentimes their name and their phone number and the photo of their face is usually bigger than the address of the property they're trying to sell.
I've seen multiple times, and I won't rat him out because he's a friend of mine who happens to work in the neighborhood where I live. I have gotten flyers from him that are like his picture, his this, and I'm literally searching to be like, I know there's a house for sale here, but there's no price, just in case from the time they go to print to the time they list, they do a price change. So there's no price. Maybe there's a QR code for me to go do more work and find out more about the house. But really, and I get it, like it's marketing. It's just about him getting in front of me in case I decide to sell my house. Has nothing to do with the property.
Well, in real estate, I think every realtor would agree with this. You're better off usually selling faster than taking a long time, because if you put something on the market and you're still on the market after 2 weeks, the market already knows that you're probably overpriced if it's still available. That's one thing. But the thing is, when you have to, get mailers done or advertise it in the newspaper. Like, for example, when we advertise in the LA Times, I have to get my proof copy into the LA Times by Tuesday night. So by the time it runs on Sunday, it's already 4 days, 5 days old. So you're looking at old stuff. If you're shopping for real estate, in the newspaper, like I tell my clients all the time to think that your buyer is going to wait for the newspaper boy to shop for real estate. That's the stupidest thing in the world to think about. Wouldn't you rather me spend my money on things that really work?
Yeah. So give me one more thing that doesn't work, and then I want to go into kind of your backstory and some stuff that does work.
Open houses don't work.
Oh, dude, you're gonna ruffle some feathers. Okay, I'm gonna lose all my realtor relationships, and you're gonna be persona non grata in your office because I agree with you. Tell me what people say open houses do, and then what's your take on why open houses don't really work for the property or the seller?
Look, this is not really my opinion. This is statistics. So the National Association of Realtors, like I said, they put out this questionnaire. They do not ask buyers, did you find this house from an open house? The only question they ask about open houses, because they know the number is so low, they ask, did you find your house from an open house sign, a billboard, any other sign? And they wrap that all up together and they say you have an 8% chance of selling your house because of an open house. It's not the open house, it's the open house sign. And a lot of people, if they can go look at a house on an open house, they're going to go look at the open house, of course. And they do buy, but how do they initially find it? Usually they found it through the internet. I mean, it's like, I think it's at 92% right now. That's how your buyer's going to find the property.
So you're saying 92% find it by the property or by the internet. They find the property via the internet.
Yeah.
You rather schedule individual appointments with them than just doing a Sunday cattle call and having 50 nosy neighbors, walk through my bedroom.
Yeah, it's most of the time, open houses are looky-loos. We've all done the same thing. You've done the same thing. You've walked through. Do you tell them you're a licensee when you walk through an open house? You just like, I'm just looking. Yeah. We all do the same thing. We're all guilty of all of that, and that's fine. But let me tell you the kicker. This is the kicker. This is what's crazy. So they interview all these buyers and sellers that sell houses, but they also interview real estate agents. And they ask real estate agents, what do you do at open houses? 49%, this is shocking. 49% of all realtors arm themselves at open houses. 49% of them. They arm themselves. The number one thing that realtors have is pepper spray. The next thing they have is a gun, a knife, or a taser, in that order. Can you imagine having a job where you're trying to get leads so bad that you're willing to bring a gun to work? You're willing to bring pepper spray or a knife or a taser. It's just crazy. So get this. So when I got into the business years ago, we had, I don't know if you may have remembered this, we had Realtor Safety Day. And this was a day, one day, and it only lasted like 2 years, where they decided this was such a big problem with realtors getting attacked and all the crazy stuff that happens out that we're hearing about. But let's focus on realtor safety. Let's talk about what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. That was so popular. It went to Realtor Safety Week, and that lasted another 2 years. We now have Realtor Safety Month, the whole month of September. It's that big of a problem. Isn't that shocking?
And so here's what's shocking to me. All right, let's say you do have a job where you have to bring a gun to work to get leads, or you have for some people that are anti-gun, I totally get it. You have a knife or pepper spray or whatever you think is going to save you.
Yeah.
What blows my mind is I know, Mike, because I've asked some people who you and I know who do a ton of open houses, and I'm like, look, I know for a fact that sign-in sheet, you don't do anything with it. Why don't you just email it to me on Monday morning and I'll call the leads for you. If I can convert them into a pre-approved buyer, I'll get them back. No, we're going to do this. We've been meaning to do that. We're going to get this iPad to have them sign in. So I know that I got a real address on the spot. I got a real email. The number of realtors who actually do strategic lead follow-up from the open house is so freaking minuscule. And, any realtor watching this, well, that one time I met that guy and we really hit it off. I'm like, I'm not talking about the person who you accidentally met at an open house, who you hit it off. You were both wearing a Pittsburgh Steelers shirt, so you had something in common to talk about. Yes, that happens. Good for you. You generated some business. But I've got 13 leads I'm going to follow up with 9 or 10 times until they say, yes, let's do a buyer's consult or don't ever call me again. No realtors are doing that. So not only are you probably putting yourself in danger, probably trying to get your name and face and everything out there at really, to what you said, no huge benefit to selling the house. You're also not even doing the business development stuff of taking the leads you got and working the leads. So I'm like, why did you waste your Sunday doing this? It just blows my mind.
Well, one of the things that they also talk about in the realtor survey is that you ought to be able to get 2 qualified leads for every listing that you have. Not if you have a buyer transaction, but if you have a listing, if you're representing a seller. And we all know that sellers that are thinking about selling go to the neighborhood open house. And then now you have an opportunity to use somebody's living room to have a face-to-face conversation with somebody that's probably thinking about selling. That's huge. Everybody wants leads. And if you talk to any realtor after they do an open house, they all talk about the same thing. They're all about getting leads. They're not all about selling that house. It's a fantastic way to generate leads and get to know people, is to use somebody else's living room for it. But there's also a lot of problems with open houses. I mean, hey, this is something people don't like to talk about, and my brokerage doesn't like to talk about it. But this happens. It hasn't happened in my brokerage, but another brokerage down the street it happened to, where they had an open house. Somebody went into the house during the open house, and they hid underneath the bed. They waited until the open house was done with, and the realtor leaves. And guess what? That person asked the realtor, so where are the owners living here or whatever? And she said, no, they don't live right here. They're actually out of town while we put the house on the market. So this guy goes underneath the bed, waits for the open house to close up. The realtor closes it up, locks it up. He goes to the back door, unlocks it, and just unloads the house. Hey, this happens a lot. And brokerages don't want anybody to know about this. They don't want it in the newspaper.
Yeah, of course. Because having open houses is the biggest lead generation source for listings. A good realtor you and I know, who's now retired, but I still won't use her name. I remember seeing her on a panel and somebody asked hey, you're the listing queen of this neighborhood. How do you get listings? And she's like, oh, it's very easy. To get listings, you have listings. Because exactly what you just said, if you do an open house on Sunday and Tuesday and Thursday and the following Saturday and the following Sunday, and you have this cadence, and then you accept the offers exactly in 1 week, then, you know, you get a shot at everybody in the neighborhood coming into the house. You get to talk to them. You get to show that you're the neighborhood expert, and you get to meet all the neighbors who also might be selling. And then they invite you over and you sell their house and rinse and repeat. And by the way, the realtor who did this methodology, she's a phenomenal realtor that gets top dollar for her listings. So it's not like she's abusing her client. She does a great job for her clients. And those clients all came from open houses. So it's a little bit of a virtuous cycle where it's like, if you want a seasoned agent, you probably need to have an agent that does open houses, because those are the type of agents that get listings. So what's your methodology for saying, no, you don't have to do that. I can get your house sold. And obviously 20 something years later, you're still in business. So you're getting plenty of listings. Like, what's your methodology? How do you turn this on its head?
I'm not going to tell you because it's my secret. No, the thing is, look, real basics, price. Price is really important. I've had clients that want to overprice their listings, and they think, oh, okay, so if the house is worth 1.5, let's put it on for 1.8. It'll make it look like it's more valuable. Well, if that was the case, we'd list out every property at $10 million. You just don't do it that way. You got to price it correctly. You also have, the marketing has to look great. You have to have professional photos. You should have a floor plan. You should have a drone shot, because your first showing is actually on the internet. Your second showing is the validation showing. They're there to validate it, because we all know that real estate, the buyers, they have ADD.
Yep.
The way they search for real estate, they're looking for a reason to say no, and they just keep clicking. There's a study that was done by Harvard a few years ago where they researched how people search for listings, and they found that 60% of the people read the first 2 sentences and 40% read the whole thing. People don't really read that much, but they're looking at photos. So if you have great photos, not like some of these crazy photos where people use, fisheye lenses and it's all distorted and stuff like that, and you change the colors, or there's some agents that they'll Photoshop stuff that you really shouldn't be Photoshopping. You really shouldn't be doing that with your photos. But if you can knock it out of the park with great photos, and not too many, I mean, there's a whole chapter about photos. You don't want to have 100 photos. Guess what? They don't have to come to the house. They've seen it.
Yeah, they don't care.
There needs to be a happy balance, anywhere between 14, maybe 30 photos that you need to have. You need to have a floor plan. Sometimes a floor plan is a double-edged sword too. You may have a crappy floor plan. Sometimes you don't put a floor plan on there because you want to get them to the house. The whole thing is that the whole job of the real estate agent is to entice them with the photos, the floor plan, the description, and the price to come to the house. But also, what you really want to do is you want to sell it quickly. You don't want to be on the market too long. You actually make more money the faster you sell it. And I know your listeners may be thinking, oh, that's this cheesy, pushy realtor that just wants to make a fast buck, but you'll actually make more money. If you go on the MLS as a real estate agent and you search all the high comps, most of the time, the high comps, even if you're looking at price per square foot, which is a lazy way of looking at real estate, but anyways, if you're looking at even price per square foot, you will find that most of the time, those high comps all sold within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Just because the market has spoken and they don't know. At the end of the day, your property is only worth what a buyer thinks it's worth. And if you can capture that magic in the very beginning, it's great. But if you look at any data anywhere in the United States, the longer it takes to sell a house, the less and less of a chance do they hit that asking price, or it goes lower than that. Unless, of course, the market is, unless you have a COVID bump or something like that.
Right.
Well, even in a marketplace like this, the market eventually catches up to you. I mean, so you can prove me wrong by saying, oh, that doesn't work. Yeah, after 4 months, you finally got your price. Well, that's probably because in 4 months, the market went up and it finally hit that market.
Right.
Hit that price.
Man, you brought up one of my biggest pet peeves. Can I tell you one of the biggest things I hate about realtors is this price per square foot thing. Like, first of all, there is nowhere on the appraisal where it says price per square foot. And I understand that that's some shorthand that has entered the popular zeitgeist.
It's lazy.
It's lazy, yeah. Because they're even on the appraisal, which is 37 pages, there is no place for an appraiser to put price per square foot. And what really bugs me is agents who you and I both know, when the property is huge, but it's a piece of junk, they'll yell at me, your appraiser doesn't get it. The price per square foot is XYZ, blah, 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 blah. And then 6 months later, when they have a tiny bungalow that has this amazing fit and finish, they're like, your appraiser doesn't understand. Yes, it's undersized and it's only 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, but it's so cute. It should demand the highest price in the market. I'm like, the same realtor. You can't have it the same way. You can't say I want price per square foot on the big kind of socially awkward house and then say that you want the appraiser to not evaluate price per square feet when it's a super cute pied a terre that has all kinds of character. I'm like, dude, appraisers have a shitty job as it is. There is no reason for any of us to yell at them.
How about realtor.com, redfin.com, and Zillow.com estimates? Oh my God. Remember when Zillow came out? Zillow came out about 20 years ago. We all thought the real estate market for agents was over because they were going to replace us, because they can come in there with their algorithms and their 97 points of data and figure out what your house is worth. And here we are 20 years later, and I like to tell people all these algorithms are a good reason why you need a real estate agent. I have a listing I was just interviewed yesterday in Bungalow Heaven. The values were $999, $1 million, and $1.3 million for this house. Those are it's all over the place. It's probably like $1,250,000 house. It's probably $1,250,000 house. But these algorithms, that even with AI, they don't understand nuances. They don't understand character. They don't understand feel, flow, light, quality of construction, if the style is done correctly, how it's placed on the lot. There's so many nuances, and those are all things that people really value, but you can't get that with the valuation, with Zillow and any of those other things.
Right. So were you kidding about saying that you're not going to tell me what your secret sauce is for getting listing?
I'm telling you.
Okay. So so tell me, like, if you're not doing the open houses, if you're not, plastering the neighborhood with just listed, just sold houses where the house is this big and Mike Bell's dome is this big, like, how are you going about running a sustainable business? And I suspect it has something to do with referrals because you're doing something different.
Well, in terms of the business and in terms of selling a property, a little bit different, but in a way, one of the things that is a differentiator for me versus most realtors in town is everybody kind of knows I have a reputation for not representing buyers on my own transactions. So I don't subscribe to dual agency. Dual agency is when the agent represents both sides.
I literally underlined that in your book because I'm like, I want to talk about that because I think dual agency is BS.
So it's against the law. It's against the law in 5 states, but it's not against the law in California. So in California, our state legislature feels compelled that if you're a buyer and you really want to buy a place, we shouldn't stop you from picking up the phone and calling the realtor that's representing the seller so you can get housing. And the California Association of Realtors believes in that too. That's their number one thing that they're protecting is, well, there's 2 things they're trying to protect. They're trying to protect dual agency, and they're trying to protect the to be able to write off your interest, mortgage deduction. So those are the 2 big things. But, this is the thing about dual agency. If you have an agent who has a reputation for not representing buyers, guess what? You're going to get more buyers that are willing to write an offer because the top realtors in the area, everybody knows who the top realtors are, and they know if they bring in their own buyers. If they bring in their own buyers, a normal buyer is going to have a very small chance usually to be able to buy that property. It's just the way it works.
Yep.
So I don't do dual agency. I talk to my sellers all about it. I tell them all up front, hey, when you interviewed me, I talked about this in the first 2 minutes. And if you're going to interview other agents, they should be able to bring this up. You shouldn't have to say, I don't want dual agency. They ought to be able to tell you right up front, hey, I just don't do this.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. So this is the crazy thing. People go, well, if you won't represent a buyer, what happens when a buyer calls you? We just lost a sale. Look, it doesn't really happen. I mean, 1 in 40 people in the state of California has a real estate license. So this is how it works. I put a property on the market. I list it on the MLS. I get this happens on every one of my transactions. I get a phone call from somebody that says, "I saw your house on the market. I don't have an agent. I want to buy it. Let's talk. Can you get me inside?" And then I say, I have an agreement with the seller. I can't represent a buyer on this transaction. I'd be happy to tell you everything you want to know about the property. We'll get you inside. Don't worry about that. And I'll also find you a real estate agent. But I just want to let you know I can't represent you and I won't represent you. And then guess what they all say?
They all say, "Oh, well, actually, I'm working with Jim. He can just write the offer."
Yeah, or my mom or my best friend, or I've been looking for 2 years. It's like,
Yeah.
you just lied to me and you thought I was
Yeah.
a dirtbag,
Yeah.
but it is what it is.
And by the way, it's funny. We unfortunately don't get to work together very often because you don't have very many buyers. But
Yeah.
I am one of the things that people that do work with me know is I am neurotic about tracking. So like if you gave me a lead in 2014, I can look them up. I know where they came from. I know about the stuff. Through being neurotic about tracking, do you know what I have find out, Mr. Michael Bell, is that anybody who calls me and says, "Oh, I'm just going directly through the listing agent. I don't have a buyer's agent." I do my due diligence, so I'm not breaking the federal law. I send them the information to apply, and I never follow up with them because 100% of those people are also the type of people who will use me for education, use me for 57 pre-approval letters, and then the day they go under contract, they're like, "Oh, Scott, well, it turns out I've also been talking to Guild and Movement Mortgage and Bank of America and Citibank. Here's the lowest rate I found. I'm just going to go with them unless you can beat it." I'm like, "Okay, cool." So the 9 months that we worked together when I was educating you and giving you market updates, and like that happens so often that if somebody calls me and they're like, "Hey, I was introduced to you by Jason, and he met me in an open house. He says I need to get pre-approved." And I'm like, "Cool, well, let's start a text message thread with Jason so that we can answer your questions." "Oh, no, don't do that because we'll probably just end up going through the listing agent whenever we find a place to buy." I send them the application. I never follow up again because I know they're going to be an absolute waste of my freaking time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other thing about this dual agency thing, when I explain this to the seller, first of all, you're going to probably get more offers. And normally what you want is a bidding war. It's great to if you can put a property on the market that's at market price or a little bit below, guess what? The market will react. The market will, all of a sudden you're going to get offers. You're just going to get offers. If it's priced too high, you're not going to get anything. If it's priced way too low, you'll get 25 offers or something like that, which is way too much for a real estate, a normal mortal person to be able to handle. But if you can hit the right number, your sweet spot is to get maybe less, around 5 offers would be great, but 10 offers is fine. And what you want to do is to have a bidding war. And guess what? You're going to have a great bidding war if everybody knows that they're not competing with you. So I explain to the buyer's agents, "Hey, by the way, I just want to remind you, I don't have a cat, I don't have a dog in this game, whatever you call it, a pony in this game, whatever. You're not competing with me. We're going to cooperate with everybody." And at the end of the day, the seller wants, what does the seller want? All of them want the same thing. They want the most amount of money with the best terms that can close.
Right.
Pretty simple.
Right.
But to get there, you have to encourage the market, and that's a great way of doing it.
Dude, I want to ask you about this terms thing. And oh man, if any of my realtors are watching this, they're just not going to work with me anymore. But it's like, this thing started to happen. I've been doing this for 25 years. And I get it. This thing started to happen like 12 years ago where it's like, we're going to remove the contingencies. Okay. So Mike Bell's the listing agent, Joe Blow is the buyer's agent, and we have the deal. And look, I'm super diligent up front. We do all the underwriting. We do everything. A lot of my clients are very wealthy. So even if the appraisal comes in, $50,000 below the contract price, we can still bridge the gap, all of that stuff. But it's like, that I know that Joe Blow knows that everybody's making the call like, "Hey, Scott, we're going to remove the loan contingency and the appraisal contingency up front. can you make sure you have it back in 7 days so that if we need to back out of the deal, we can back out under the inspection contingency? Or, I'll just pretend like we didn't receive the natural hazard disclosure, because if the listing agent forgets to send that to me and 2 weeks from now we want to blow up the deal, we can just say that there was something in natural hazard disclosure that we wanted to cancel. Or so there's all these bullshit shenanigans back and forth of like, well, I'm going to remove the contingencies, but it doesn't really mean that we remove the contingencies. And that I know that we all know this is bullshit, and they've got a way to get out of jail free, but we still have to go through this headache of removing the contingencies. And there's a realtor who and I know that I don't work with anymore, because his MO is he will start accepting offers on Monday, and he will grind and grind and grind and grind to shorten all the contingencies, and then always accepts the offer at 4:45 on Friday night. And I'm like, hey man, that's unfair that we have a 7-day whatever contingency and you've accepted on Friday night when we can't get inspectors involved. I can't get my team working on ordering the appraisal. Like, you basically just cost us the first 72 hours of our 7-day contingency. And it just all feels like games, and it all feels like more stress that we put on the market doing real estate in LA, which I will tell you, now doing real estate in 40 other states, these shenanigans do not exist in other states. It's only in Southern California. So can you speak a little bit to, like, when you say I'm looking for a deal with the best terms and I'm telling you that this is all just shenanigans with the terms, can you tell me what you're actually looking for?
So if you're a seller and you're listening to this, one of the things I recommend is that when you do put a property on the market, have all your disclosures done. And that's your title report. If there's going to be any termite reports, if you're going to do a pre-inspection, like a regular inspection, but all the other disclosures, because at least in California, you have in the contract that we use in California, we have the seller has a certain amount of days to disclose this to the buyer. Now that's all negotiable, but the standard language in the contract, the boilerplate, says 5 days. I'm sorry, 7 days. Dropped my phone. Sorry. But if you don't do it, and the buyer has shorter contingencies, and I have to give a disclosure that's late, that buyer has 5 days. So that's kind of the way they kind of trick this stuff. So for example, you're in a transaction, a buyer's in a transaction, he's on day 10, he's removed all of his contingencies, and the seller finally gets you the plotted easements on the title report. That's a new disclosure. Buyer has 5 days. That's a 5-day inspection contingency when they can back out. So it's important. You don't really want a buyer to back out, but it's important to get all of that stuff done up front. I'll tell you, I'm one of the only realtors in town that does that, and it's a pain. It's a lot of work. The seller doesn't like it, but you know what? You're better off with the disclosure package. And when you're in the middle of a bidding war, you give that, or before the bidding war, you give that to all your buyers and say, hey, here's the disclosure package. And this is the thing. I don't require that they sign it. I just tell them everybody else is. And guess what? The real buyers will sign all of that stuff. So if you've got a red flag, if you got an issue, you've got a problem, get it all out in the very beginning.
Yeah.
But the other thing I want to talk about in terms of contingencies and stuff like that, it took me years to realize this, but I'm not the seller. It's the seller's decision. My job is to give them advice, but also you don't want to be the realtor that screws up deals, that gets people get cold feet and stuff like that. So yeah, there's realtors out there that scare everybody, and they get them. They push everybody to get really short contingencies, and you wind up losing potentially some of your best buyers, because, like I said, your best buyer is going to be the highest paid buyer with the best terms, and the market needs to dictate those two things. Let the market dictate the price. Like when I do a multiple counter offer and we do a bidding war, I ask the buyer. Now, buyers are going to hate this, but I ask the buyer to set the market, because at the end of the day, the buyer sets the market. It doesn't matter if you're selling a car or what, the buyer sets the market. So I want the buyer to set the market, but the buyer really needs to set the terms too. So I pick up the phone. I don't like to hide behind a computer screen. I'll pick up the phone and I talk to all the realtors and say, hey, where are you on all this? I mean, sometimes a 7-day loan contingency is just fine. That's the best buyer.
There's also this weird thing where it's like, if you can cancel for any reason, why even have the contingency, right? So like theoretically, and this has always been kind of silly to me of like the inspection contingency, the loan contingency, the appraisal contingency, them all being different. I mean, technically, if you have a 7-day inspection contingency, the client's finances can be in order. The appraisal can come back $200,000 over the contract price. And the client can be like, you know what? I totally forgot that the sun sets in the west. I don't really like where the master bedroom's windows are. It's during the inspection contingency. I'm going to go ahead and cancel. So this idea that we kind of split Solomon's baby, for those that didn't go to catechism, that's the king that tried to split the baby. We're trying to split the baby with like the loan contingency versus the appraisal versus the inspection. It all just seems like extra drama where it could be like, hey, how long do you need to know that you're absolutely going to buy this house? 1 day, 5 days, 7 days? Just make that the thing instead of all these different contingencies and weird things. It's like the California real estate contract purchase agreement just seems super antiquated to me from like a time where like communication didn't exist.
Well, let me tell you something, and I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving you legal advice. Go get an attorney to talk about what I'm about to say. But at the end of the day, you have a buyer that wants to buy and a seller that usually wants to sell. And if you're a buyer and you're in the middle of a transaction and you need to pull out and you want to get your deposit money, because normally in California it's 3% deposit. 3% could easily be $60,000. It's a lot of money.
A lot of money.
Look, this is the thing. Realtors say this all the time. You're going to lose your money. Look, if you have an escrow, the money goes into escrow. The escrow needs to get an approval from both buyer and seller to agree to do whatever it needs to do. This is the thing. If you're a buyer and you put all this money down and the seller says they're going to take your money if you don't close, it's kind of hard. I'll tell you why. First of all, they have to have an escrow instruction that says that, or you have to have a judgment. Judgment's expensive and it takes forever to do.
Yeah.
There's that. But this is the thing too, is the seller can't just go out and sell it to somebody else because they have what's called a cloud on title. They still have a contract with you. Right. Even if you've said you're not moving forward, you still don't have a canceled escrow. That creates a cloud. The seller winds up figuring this out pretty quickly and goes, oh crap. And you know what happens a lot of times? Hey, I'm not an attorney, but what happens a lot of times, the seller goes, you know what? This really sucks. You can have your money back. I want to move on. I want to move to Vegas. I want to sell my house. I want to work with these other buyers. And usually buyers get their money back. If you talk to an attorney, the attorney's going to say usually they don't get their money back. But those are for the folks that had to go through the attorney process. But right. Usually what happens is you pick up the phone, you call an attorney as a seller or a buyer, and you're like, oh my God, let's just give each other their money back and move on. That's what usually happens.
You know what's crazy? You know what's crazy? I experienced this on the buy side, and I don't think I've ever told this story before. At the beginning of COVID, before mortgages went crazy and we were printing money because rates went so low, my wife and I were thinking about moving to Texas, and we found a like summer camp. It had like a 3-bedroom house and then like 8 cabins, a dining hall, a pool, an archery range, the whole 9 yards. And it was like, oh, this is my like dream to live on like a Boy Scout summer camp and like do coaching retreats there and host weddings and do like adult stuff, right? And so we went under contract. I can't remember exactly what, $1.5 million. And then prices, this was outside of Austin, prices started going through the roofs. Rates came down. The people we were buying it for had like a silent partner we didn't know about that said, no, we could get 2.5 million for this, you moron. And we got to this impasse where like I was getting an SBA loan because it was a business and you couldn't get a traditional loan. And the seller just basically refused to provide the P&L from the business and the balance sheet and everything so that I could get a commercial loan, because in a commercial loan, you have to be very complementary and work together because you need all the finances of how that commercial property is being run. And he just said, no, I'm not going to provide that. And so I went to an attorney and they're like, oh yeah, we could litigate this. We could force him to give you that paperwork and force him to sell you the property, but it's going to be about 2 years and 200 grand into the process. How badly do you want this property? And then by that time we were printing money in loans and we just figured everything out. But yeah, it's like, there's almost always a way to get out of it. Again, I'm not an attorney, go hire an attorney, find a real estate attorney. But in 24 years of doing this, I've had some pretty hotly contested situations that had nothing to do with me or you or anything. You know, buyer lost their job, seller got mad and didn't want to sell the property, whatever. I've had one person in 23 years lose their deposit because it turns out that they were committing fraud. And so I didn't feel like going to bat for that person. So yeah, it's so rare.
That's interesting because I've sold like 650 homes in my career. Twice we took the buyer's money. Both times we told them we're not going to take the whole thing. I think we kept on both. One situation we wanted half, the other one we wanted 75%. We said, take it or leave it. You got till the end of the day. We're going to take 75% or 50% of your deposit, and after tomorrow, we're just going to get an attorney and we're going to go for the whole thing. And both times they settled, and both times I don't know who they called, but they probably didn't call a real estate attorney. They probably called their family attorney, or, you know, a jack of all trades is the master of none. And they probably said, holy crap, take the deal and move on. But otherwise, but look, if these guys probably contacted a real estate attorney, the real estate attorney would be like, just drag them out. You'll probably get a better deal. It's really hard for a seller to take their money. It just is.
So now that we've talked about the 1 in 300 or 1 in 1,000 scenario, how do you advise your clients? Because, you know, the thing is, when people think, oh, there's these iBuyer programs and there's Redfin and AI is going to replace all this, what they don't understand is they've never worked in a real estate transaction where it's like most of what you're doing is managing emotion, managing risk, managing the process. We could teach an AI bot or a chimpanzee how to fill out an RPA. Like that's not where the gold is made by Michael Bell. Like your gold is made through education, being an advocate, you know, keeping tensions low. So like, what are some of the skills that you bring to the table to get the transaction done? Because I've had some good friends go through real estate transactions and they're like, Scott, you do like 5 or 10 of these a day or 5 or 10 of these a month. And I'm like, yeah, like 5 to 10 a month, every month for the last 23 years. They're like, I can't even believe that you're still like of sound mind, because this is crazy. Like the emotional roller coaster for buyers and sellers can be wild. So like, what are some things you're bringing to the table to like bring the noise down? Because everybody that I've worked with on the seller side, when I've had a buyer, is like, it's just calm. It's just peaceful. It's an easy transaction.
Well, a lot of it has to do with just being prepared. Because if you're not prepared, I mean, there's landmines throughout these transactions. They're hard. You know, it's interesting. So it's in my book, but every year for the last 20 years, on average, based upon the surveys of these people, that they asked this one question: how important is it to hire a real estate professional? And there's, you know, extremely important, moderately important, not very important at all. In terms of extremely important, that percentage has gone up on average 1% a year over the last 20 years. You would think people would be like, oh, I can have AI do it, or I can put it on this portal, or I can FSBO it, which is for sale by owner, and I don't really need the agent. But actually, what's interesting is that the people that are working with agents realize how important it is to have them, and it's close to 95% right now. So the other thing, it's amazing. The other thing is it's so complex what we do, and that's the main reason. For example, I don't know if you know this or not, but the California Association of Realtors is redoing their purchase contract again in July. Here it is. But they've redone it every year, and right now, if somebody writes an offer on a property with all the standard stuff that's in there, and if they have a pre-approval letter and proof of funds, it's like 17. It could be 29 pages. It's, you know, nobody really understands this stuff unless you're doing it over and over again. When I present offers, I present them to the seller and I give them a synopsis. I break it all down because it's really hard to understand this stuff, to understand the nuances and what's good and what's bad and what we should counter, because they haven't seen it before. I mean, the average home seller, the average home buyer these days, the National Association of Realtors just put out a new their new survey. Guess how long buyers are telling the survey how long they intend to stay in that house. Buyers today.
Well, this is interesting. This is a really interesting stat. I'm glad you have some numbers on this, because I remember a time where in California, your average buyer stayed in the home about 7 to 8 years, because California is a transient neighborhood. You know, interest rates
years ago.
Yeah, interest rates have been on a 40-year decline. So it's like, yeah, of course I'll move because interest rates will be cheaper in 5 years and, my property will be worth more. I would be willing to guess because of interest rate lock-in, fatigue of shopping, people waiting until they're much older in life to buy houses. This is kind of just the demographics. I
Yeah.
would guess most people are saying, we're going to be here for 20 years, long enough to get their kids out of high school.
And maybe it'll get to 20 years, but it's 15 now.
15.
Last year was 13.
That's still double what it was 10 years ago when it was like 7 or 8. I mean, that's
Yeah.
wild. And I think with interest rate capture, with there just continuing to be less inventory because a huge percentage of the population either owns their house free and clear or they're financed at a 3% interest rate and they're never moving. I think that number will just keep going up and up. Like, who wants to go through this process of shopping for a house for a year and writing offers for a year? Seems miserable.
But the average seller is holding on to their house for 10 years that are selling right now. I'm talking about the 15 years is what the buyer is saying they intend to do.
Oh, yeah.
But the seller, so you're doing this once every 10 years. It's overwhelming. I don't understand how AI, it really needs to go by leaps and bounds to replace us, but
Yeah.
I don't see it happening.
Everything you're describing, we have a mutual friend who's retired, Kirk Giroux, used to be the manager over at Prudential. We're really close. And it's like the number of offers that he would get accepted as a buyer's agent by just being a professional. Like, every page of the contract is filled out. There's a cover letter explaining the terms. All the disclosures are signed up front. It's like the number of at-bats he got for his clients by literally just doing the job for which he signed up for. It's bonkers because there's a lot of people in our industry, mortgages and real estate combined, that just don't do the minimum. It's kind of bonkers. So how much does that play into your decision of like, I'm just a buyer. I don't know. I'm working with my Uncle Chuck who does, one transaction every 2 years. How much does it really matter to the listing agent and the seller on like how seasoned the buyer's agent is and how that package comes over?
So the realtor that you're working with is kind of part of the transaction. And if you're in the industry, you kind of know who the agents are that play games and stuff like that, or that you can't trust, or they flat out lie to you. There's not that many of them. I think most of them are very well intentioned. They all try. I'm probably too nice to all of them, but I help them out if they're missing something, or believe it or not, people, I don't know how they do it, but they use old forms. I have a probate that I'm selling on Linda Vista in Pasadena, and the guy wrote an offer on a form that was done 3 years ago, and it's like, sorry, I can't use this. Our office, with all the errors and omissions insurance and the insurance and the liability, you have to use the most updated form from the forms library. I help him out. He was, I don't even know how the hell he got that form, but it's important. Unfortunately, the way a transaction is started is usually the way the whole transaction is going to go through. So if you have an agent that kind of doesn't know what they're doing, and maybe they use the wrong form, or they don't have everything signed, or they have to send it to you in pieces or I had an agent 2 years ago that wrote an offer. They didn't have a scanner, so he took a picture of each page and texted it to me.
For those of you that are listening to the audio and not watching the video, I just walked away from my computer because I thought only buyers did that when they're sending me their tax returns. You had an agent send you a text picture of the contract, one page.
He texted like 30 pages. Each one was like 2 megabytes. And I told him, I'm like, I want to help you out, but you got to go over to Kinko's. You got to go out and get this thing done. You're a professional. I don't really have a whole hour to do this, but this is the kicker. Legally, I have to present that offer.
Right.
I have to, unless I get permission from the seller specifically that says, no, you don't have to present that. You should only be able to present to me. I only want to see complete offers. If my seller says, I want a complete offer with one PDF, yes, sir, no, sir. And so I called that agent, and he got mad at me, actually. He was like, well, I'm still presented. And I go, yeah, legally, I'm supposed to present it. I have specific instructions from the seller They just want to see a normal PDF like everybody else. So I don't have to present it. It's going to take an hour to put the stuff together. I mean, how do I turn JPEGs and piece them all together into a PDF? I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this, and you might not feel comfortable commenting on this, so feel free to tell me, I plead the fifth. There was a small real estate brokerage in one of the areas that we serve, and it was just known that if you had a buyer that was looking at one of their properties, it was like, hey man, I would love to help you, but if this is really the house for you, just go talk to the listing agent, because we have a 0% chance of getting the offer accepted, because they were always doing dual agency, which is something I really respect about you, that you just won't do it. And so it got to the point where one of my realtors had a contract, sent the contract over, I can't remember, email, maybe it was so old, maybe it was so long ago, it was by fax, sent the contract over, 335, 835, doesn't matter, and just no response, right? Client went directly to the listing agent, same price, offer accepted, closed the deal. And he's like, I'm thinking about reporting them to the California Association of Realtors, because I have the confirmation that they got the offer from me, from the same client with the same pre-approval at the same price. They didn't even respond. They clearly didn't present the offer to the seller. But then, of course, they go through them and they do dual agency and they make twice the money. And like, this agent didn't have the gusto or the intestinal fortitude, or as I would call it, the balls, to call that person out, because he's like, well, what if I want to work with them on another deal? I'm like, well, you're not going to work with them on another deal because they're doing this shady stuff. Why don't you turn them in? And there's like this bro code among realtors that you guys don't turn in other realtors. And so the criminal ones and the shady ones, they just proliferate through the industry. It blows my mind.
We have an agent that does that in town right now, and it's really tough to deal with this person. I don't know if it's a bro code. It's hard to prove. Does the client really want to go through all of that? At the end of the day, the board of realtors is not going to do very much. So every board of realtors is a little bit different, but if you have a grievance, if you have a complaint, you can file it with them. They're going to investigate it. They're going to sit everybody down in a conference room and hash it out. If it seems like that agent did something wrong, they get a little letter, and the letter goes into the folder, and that's it. And after 3 letters, the board of realtors, our board of realtors, maybe this has changed but they could suspend the person's license. So you could do it, but the other thing is, what are your damages? Hey, I'm not an attorney, but what are your damages? And usually what happens is you just move on. So this is a crazy thing about this. I've done this before, and I'll tell you why. I've done this before, where I tell the client, you know what, just go direct. I want you to get the house.
I've done it too.
At the end of the day, I just want him to get a house, because you know what? If you're doing this at a high level, I did this at a high level, it's easy come, easy go. I've had deals, Scott, where I've made a lot of money, and I'd literally get a phone call, and I list the property, and 3 weeks later, it's in escrow, and 2 weeks later, it's closed, and I do pretty well. It's right. Great. It's great. And so you just balance that, and it's just the way life is sometimes, and you just move on. And you know what? That client is never going to say anything nice about that other realtor. And that client, because you fell on your sword, or you did what was best for that client, they're going to be your advocate for forever. So yeah. I mean, it sucks. Hey, it sucks. Yeah. It is a dirty part of our business, but you just move on. And it's hard, because I have agents call me all the time and stuff like this happens. It's like, I know. I mean, but think of all the ones that worked out really well.
Yeah. You know what it is? If I'm just being honest, and I try not to make these business-centric episodes political, it's the libertarian in me that can't stand that we have this giant bureaucracy called, the Board of Real Estate and the National Board of Real Estate and the National Mortgage Licensing Service. Like, we have all this giant bureaucracy, and you and I have to pay all these fees and do this continuing education. And the people that do things right, we just get taxed by the machine, which is compliance and regulation. But then when somebody's actually breaking that compliance and regulation, there's really no remedy. Like, I know dudes. I know a guy who had to testify in front of Congress in 2009 because of the amount of fraud that was going through his branch. They called him to a House congressional hearing on mortgage fraud. That guy never lost his mortgage license. He's still a top producer today. He's been sued multiple times. They've threatened taking away his license. They have him dead to rights on the amount of fraud that has happened in his office, and somehow nothing ever happens. So I'm like, well, then why do I have to pay my $400 a year to this licensing board and take continuing education and submit my credit report and do all this stuff for these regulatory agencies when you're not even going to take away the license of the real fraudsters? It blows my mind. It's like so unjust to me. But you take the high road and you're like, no, good things happen. I love that. I love that about you.
And you just move on. I mean, one of the best words in real estate is next. You just got to move on sometimes. It sucks. We get burned, we get used, we get lied to, and you got to just say next, and you just go to the next one, and you try to help as many people as you possibly can. And if you do that, you'll do really well with that attitude. But if you let it just simmer in you and get you pissed off, I mean, that's what makes people crazy in this business. I can understand why there's so many realtors out there that are just so whacked out. You have to let it go, man.
Right.
You let it go. You just move on.
So let's go backwards on the podcast, right? It's like we usually start with the origin story, but we jumped right into it. What is it about you? Like, how did you get into real estate? What industry did you come from? Like, give us a little bit of your business background, how you can have this mentality of like, hey man, it's just the next thing. Let's just move on and do it. Because nobody grows up wanting to be a loan officer or a realtor. It's not in the college curriculum. Nobody's in 10th grade being like, you know what? I can't wait to show people these houses. And nobody's growing up saying, you know what? I can't wait to look at tax returns for a living. Like, how did you get into this crazy racket?
Well, I went to Gonzaga University, and I remember the very last day of school, we had a management class, and our teacher asked us to list the 5 professions you see yourself doing and the 5 professions you see yourself never doing. And I thought I was going to be a financial advisor. There's all these things that I wanted to do. And then the number one thing I didn't want to do was be a realtor. And that was the number one thing. And then
that was really number one?
That was number one. It was like, because it just seems so cheesy and unprofessional. And seeing my mom's friends that were selling real estate back in the 1980s, it was cringy. And so there was just no way in hell with the finance degree that I was going to do that. But the teacher said, he goes, half of you are going to wind up doing something you don't like. It's just the way the world works. So deal with it, bear with it, and remember this, and keep that piece of paper. I actually kept the piece of paper. But for me, I just kept getting laid off from different jobs. I was an underwriter. I was doing commercial loans, and I got laid off by CB Commercial. I got laid off by Charles Dunn Company. And at the time, my grandfather was alive, and he built a lot of homes in Pasadena and Montrose and La Crescenta and La Cañada, him and his 2 brothers. And they had money, and he kept telling me, you should go buy houses and fix them and sell them. So I said, let's do it. So I did about 16 homes in the span of like 3 years in Northwest Pasadena and Altadena. And back then, I remember this, there was at least 100 homes on the market for under $100,000. It was all these Fannie Mae's and stuff back in.
You're not that old, are you?
I'm 54, but this is back in 1994.
Yeah.
This is 30 years ago. And so I would just write offers on these things. I would fix them and sell them. And then I couldn't find a good realtor. It just seemed like these people didn't really, they didn't know the contract very well. They didn't really seem to care. They were doing open houses. The real estate sign was crooked. I didn't like the photos. And I thought, I can do a better job than this. So I got my license. So I started representing myself. And then I bumped into all these realtors, and they're like, hey, I like the way you do things. Can I join you? Because I had a broker's license. So in my late 20s, I was the youngest practicing broker in all of Pasadena. I had 10 agents underneath me. We were over at Arcade Lane in Pasadena. It's on Colorado, right by Lake, so right in the epicenter of Pasadena. And Scott, I hated it. It was the worst. Managing realtors was horrible. So I can tell you a million stories about that, but I didn't care for that at all. So at the time, Prudential California Realty made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and basically moved everybody over there. And that was 25 years ago. And since then, I don't want to manage people. I'm not a broker manager anymore. And I have me and my assistant, and that's it. And my wife helps me, and I just sell houses.
Man, I'm with you. I took my stint at managing 40 loan officers about
Yeah.
5 or 6 years ago, and it was the worst time of my career because probably the same thing that you experienced, like managing 1099 employees, same thing for me, managing commission employees. They would come to me with a problem. I would give them a solution, or I would give them some ideas on how to make more money. They wouldn't implement, and then 2 weeks later, they'd be back with the same problem. And I'm like, you don't have to listen to my advice, or you can take my advice and take action. But what you don't get to do is use me as a sounding board and then don't take action. Like, that's not okay, because I make most of my money now off of your production and follow through. And oh, it was the worst. So I'm with you, man. Like, maybe one assistant, one partner, just do loans, stay out of the fray. Like that 2 years of managing 40 people, 3 or 4 of them stay in touch because we actually changed their lives and we're pretty impactful. But like the other 36 just nearly gave me a stroke.
Do you remember that Super Bowl commercial was for Yahoo, and it was these guys out on the range, these cowboys, and they're trying to lasso a bunch of cats, and the cats are running all over the place. That was my life as with real estate agents. And I remember seeing that commercial going, what am I doing? I'm not happy. I'm stressed. I'd rather just sell houses. I enjoy that. I enjoy that process. I enjoy being part of that journey. I'm really good at it. And
so, one of the reasons I wanted to interview you is like, you're really going against the grain, right? It's like writing a book, doing things like in a very contrarian fashion. I want to show this for anybody who's watching the video. When I got your envelope, well, I guess I can't show this because we have my home address. But when I got your envelope here with the book attached, it was like special delivery from Michael Bell. And then I turn over the package and there's a sticker sealing the envelope that says, "What's in this package?" Oh, it's just a book, but it just isn't any book. It's an author signed copy from Wall Street Journal bestseller Michael Bell. It's like all these little touches and these details. Like, you just do things different, better. You're clearly a contrarian on how you think about executing on real estate. And I think that's what needs to happen right now in a state like California, where you said 1 in 40 people are a realtor. What advice would you give like a young up and comer who's like, yeah, I get it. I see the writing on the wall that things are changing. Maybe I want to do things differently. I want to kind of blaze my own path. If you could go back and give yourself advice, or if you're just, mentoring a young realtor now, and like how they could stand out and be different and not just try to do all the same stuff everybody else does, what advice would you give them?
so in our business, there's a lot of different ways of generating leads, because at the end of the day, that's your number one job, is to generate leads. If you generate leads and if you follow up, you're in business. Now you're selling houses, and then use those houses to help generate more leads. But it all starts with leads. But I know realtors are like, oh man, if I'm a real estate agent, I got to do cold calling, I got to do door knocking, I got to do these mailers, I got to get a website, I got to do Facebook, I got to do all that stuff. I don't do a lot of that stuff. But what I think you ought to do is focus on 3 things that you like, that are affordable, and that you're going to knock out of the park and work and do really well. Because agents get burned out because they wind up doing 20 different things. And if you can't do 20 different things right, you're better off not even doing them, right?
Right.
So like one of the best years I ever had was, I decided I want to take people out to lunch. I took out somebody to lunch 3 to 4 times a week. It was expensive. And it was usually trust attorneys and probate attorneys. I just picked up the phone and said, hey, do you have time for lunch? I would tell them, I'm busy. I know you're busy. Do you have time? Do you have 20 minutes for a quick sandwich? And I'd find a sandwich place that was right by their office. And then we would just sit there and have a relationship. Our business is all about building relationships. If you can just build relationships with people. Look, I like stats. The National Association of Realtors puts out the stat as to why people hire you. Did you know that 75% of the choice that somebody uses 75% of the reason why somebody works with you, because they like you and they trust you. It has nothing to do with your brokerage. It has nothing to do with your experience. If they like and trust you, you need to go out there and get to know people. Be a human being. Be of service. Grab a bite. You know, you don't have to take people to an expensive restaurant and spend $150. Just grab a quick sandwich. And you know what? Get this. Half of them are going to say no. Half of them are going to say, I don't have time for you. But you know what? You made the contact. You reached out. Put them on your database. Stay in touch with them. Send them a Christmas card. I send Christmas cards. I don't send holiday cards. I figure if somebody gets offended by a Christmas card,
I don't want to work with them. Man, you just said something that's one of my favorite terms, be a human. You know, I also coach loan officers, and I can always tell when somebody's been in the coaching for a while and then they start taking it seriously that I got to make their calls. They'll call me. They'll be like, all right, Scott, what's the script? And I'm like, well, the script is you call and you say, hey, Mike, it's Scott. Did I catch you at a bad time? And inevitably, when he says, no, dummy, I picked up the phone. It's not a bad time. What's going on? Then the script is you be a human. Like you have conversation. You ask them how things are going. You ask them if they want to go grab a sandwich. You ask about their kids or their business or their book sales or anything other than telling them about the 2-1 buy down. Or did you know that real estate in the northern Pasadena area went up 4.2% in the last 6 months? Like nobody cares about that. They want to do business with somebody they like.
Be of service. Be nice. People just want, you can just call people and just touch base. The thing is, like, and I know some of your listeners, if they're realtors or even loan officers, are wondering, how do I get a hold of some people? Like, because you can't get through the gatekeeper. I'll tell you a great way to get through the gatekeeper. If you want to talk, like the largest law firm in Pasadena, I guess I could say it's Hahn and Hahn. I wanted to get to know the managing partner, a guy named Carl, great guy. He would never take my phone call. I wrote him a letter. Dear Carl, I'm interested in getting to know you. I would love to take you to lunch. I'm going to give you a call on X day at this time, Michael Bell. I sent it in the mail. And then that day I called and the receptionist says, is he expecting your phone call? Yes, he is. He's expecting my phone call right now. He answered. He goes, that was really good. Like, yeah. I got to know him and he's referred business to me ever since.
That's amazing. I love that.
Little things like this. Just be human. Be a little, got to write letters. You got to write cards. I mean, one of the best books I ever read. This is one of the books I would tell people to read. First of all, you should read The Millionaire Real Estate Agent from Gary Keller.
Phenomenal book. Blows my mind the number of people who work at KW and have never read that.
I don't know what to say about that. I know. There's another great book. It's called The 7 Levels of Communication from Michael Mayer. And you've probably heard of that. Yeah. It's a story about a down and out loan officer that can't get anything going, and he hears about the seminar, and it's not a true story, but this is how they talk about like what you should be doing, and you want to be influential, which is and to be influential in our business, in almost any business, there's an influential line here. Below this, you're not influential. And all the things that are not influential in real estate are newsletters, emails, social media, stuff like that. What do all realtors do? They do all that crap. What's influential? At that line is handwritten letters. And he actually, in the book, tells you what you should write in those letters, how you should write it, what color ink, what kind of envelopes you should have. The next thing is voice to voice, picking up the phone. The next thing is face to face. There's voice to voice, face to face interactions, which is why open houses are so important. You get to be face to face. And the number one thing you can do is seminars or even podcasts like this. It's very influential. You can reach a lot of people. You are the expert. I am the expert. So I do seminars. I do a lot of face to face, a lot of voice to voice. I do a lot of letter writing. It happens. Half the time I stumble over my words. I'm not the best speaker. I'm not the best communicator. Sometimes I say stupid things. But you know what? I outsell 99.8% of all the realtors in the nation, so I'm doing something right.
I love that, man.
I'm not super slick.
I just ordered 2 copies of 7 Levels of Communication. I think I had read it years ago and then given away my copy. And I got a new team member starting on Monday. So we're going to read that together because I'm kind of going over the chart with her on Monday of expectations, how our team works, whatnot. So I'm going to read that book together and implement some stuff.
Let me think. What else would I tell a young Mike Bell? I would have written that book a lot sooner, a lot earlier, I should say. So I'll tell you really quick. That book, yeah.
Seller mistakes, finding it in all your places. Amazon, excellent. Wall Street Journal bestseller.
Amazon. But
it's
what
on
happened
Amazon?
with this?
Wait, you can't find your book on Amazon?
No, it's on Amazon.
Okay. I was so sure.
Well, it sold like 40,000 copies. This is the crazy thing. I was hoping to sell 200 copies. The thing hit the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. I'm like, what the hell? I couldn't believe that happened. But for my journey for that, there was a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't agree with in the industry. There were things that realtors were doing. It just didn't make sense. So I started looking at the data, and I thought, I'm going to be the guy that writes the white paper on this. I started writing a research paper on open houses and all this stuff that really doesn't work. And I was backing it all up with statistics. And this book is full of those statistics. So it's very little of this book is my opinion. It's all stats. It's all market data. And I thought, you know what? I wound up going to a seminar about this guy was talking about self-publishing your own book. So I went over to him after the seminar and I told him I was working on this white paper, and he goes, "That would be a fantastic book." And he goes, "And we can help you with editing. We can help you." They wouldn't write it for me, but we can help you with all of this stuff. And I thought, this guy just wants to take my money. So I went online with my wife and we looked at every real estate book out there that we could find. And it just seemed all the real estate books out there were realtors that were bragging about themselves, or they were talking about staging, or they were talking about, I don't know. It wasn't that great, but nobody really had written this book. So it took me 5 years to put this thing together. By the way, you've written a book.
Yeah.
I read your book.
Thank you.
I'm really impressed with that book. That took a long time to do. I bet that was hard. You're a very good writer. Because what I learned is that you can't write the way you speak.
No.
There you go. And it's different these days because most of us are used to writing, maybe a few paragraphs, maybe 2 or 3 pages of stuff, but to have something that's 150 pages and coalesce, and it was a very daunting experience. I don't want to do it again. My mom wants me to write another book. I'm not going to write another book.
This will blow your mind. And I have heard that once you get into the mode, I've heard that fiction is easier to write than nonfiction. I don't know if I believe that, because making up a story in my head doesn't seem as easy as like writing about a subject we know, business, real estate, mortgage. But I interviewed a guy and he writes a book about every 3 to 4 months for the last 10 years, every 3 to 4 months, just like butter. And I'm like, how do you do it? And I've read them. They're good. They're like, they're this post-apocalyptic, kind of like, it's like male soap operas of like what happens with bookends. It's called The Ranch. So the Ranch series, and it's like, what a talent, right? The guy's just spun off a book every 3 to 4 months. And then, it takes several months to get through publishing and marketing and stuff. But, he's come out with 11 books in like 6 years or something. It's just mind blowing. And what a gift. So, hey, I want to end on a couple things.
Sure.
We talked about a bunch of the seller mistakes. I'd love to hear one mistake that buyers make, and I think you have a really interesting take on this because you don't represent buyers for the most part. And you're specifically telling those shady people who are like, "Oh yeah, I'll just go through you." And they're like, "Oh yeah, I do have a buyer's agent." One mistake that buyers make, we're recording this March of 2024. It'll probably drop in about a month or two because we're well ahead of schedule on the podcast. So this will come out right before the summer 2024. The thing that you're looking most forward to in the second half of this year, I'd love to hear that. And then favorite movie and why. So we'll end with those 3 questions. Biggest buyer mistake, favorite movie and why, and what are you looking forward to going into the second half of 2024?
The agent that you choose is really important. The agent is a part of the transaction. If you have somebody that you feel like a rookie, look, this is the National Association of Realtors statistic. 85% of all agents are out of the business in 5 years.
Woo.
That's a stat. That means if you're working with somebody who's been in the business for less than five years or less, there's an 85% chance they're going to be failing. I just think you should, hitch yourself to a star that's going somewhere. Use a top agent. You know what? Agents like to work with other top agents. When I'm presenting an offer to a seller, and if you have basically the same offer from two different people, the seller goes, who would you want to work with? What do you want to do? And I would say, you're better off working with an experienced agent. I know this person, or I have a relationship with this person. So you're shooting yourself in the foot. I know, you want to use your mom, you want to use your buddy or something like that, but you got to be really careful who you work with. What was the other question?
Favorite movie, and what are you looking most forward to going to the second half of the year? It can be personal, professional.
Why didn't you prep me for this?
Because it's more fun when we hit people right in the gut.
Favorite movie recently?
Yeah, or of all time. Like I'm a crazy movie buff. Like I leave work early almost every Friday to go to the movies with the wife and kids. We're seeing Dune 2 tonight. But
I
yeah,
heard
like,
it got bad reviews, man.
no, it's gonna be awesome. I just am such a movie nut. I feel like I can learn a lot about people when they tell me their favorite movie.
Well, I just got through watching Ozark for the second time, and I'm going to start watching Better Call Saul. I know those aren't movies, but I couldn't stop watching those things. Um, I don't know. I don't get out to the movies that much. That
All
just
right.
said a lot about me.
I
What
thought,
a
I thought you were going to
loser.
tell me. I thought you were going to tell me like Animal House or something like that. Something from your youth. But yeah. What about second half of the year? What are you looking most forward to?
I'm having a great year. Knock on wood. There's a real estate recession in our industry, as you know.
Yeah.
Prices are not prices, but deals are down in our area in Pasadena. Deals are down by 70% in the last 2 years. It's
Yeah.
really tough. Agents are getting out of the business right now. That's good and bad. But
Clarify, please. Clarify, because I
yeah,
think when us agents and loan officers complain about the lack of transactions, clients then think we're talking about a crash in prices, which is absolutely not
no,
happening. So then they get scared about buying a house, and it's like a negative feedback loop. So when you said, things are down 70%, that's the number of transactions, not like
that's
the
the
sales
number of
price.
that's the number of transactions. That's not the sales prices.
Yeah.
No, I know every market's different, but I'm in the greater Pasadena area, so we're in Pasadena, La Cañada, San Marino, South Pasadena, Altadena, Monrovia, Sierra Madre. That area that's gone up in value
Yeah.
for 16 years straight. We've never had a bull market last more than, I think, in residential real estate, more than 10, 11 years, and we're on year 16 ish,
Yeah.
something like that. It's kind of crazy, but is it going to crash? I mean, that's another conversation. I mean, for it to crash, you've got to have job losses. You've got to
Right.
have an administration that's not going to bail people out. You've got to have a lot of other things happening. And there's, foreclosures, they're saying foreclosures are up. Well, of course they're up because there were no foreclosures before in COVID. So
Right.
they're trying to make a story up, but at the
Yeah.
end of the day, I mean, it's a fantastic time to sell. It's a tough time to buy. I mean, I feel bad for the buyers, but I feel horrible for them.
It is rough. And somebody who you would respect a lot, Barry Habib, he's kind of the stat guy in the mortgage
He's the
business.
best.
He's
God,
the
he's
best.
good.
So he said something the other day. He's like, anybody that thinks we're about to crash, they don't understand this term. And he said demographics are destiny. And there's just way too many household formations, and there's way too many adults that held off on the adult decisions, getting married, having kids, buying houses. There's just tens of millions of them entering the market over the next 10 years that we cannot build enough houses to keep demand up with, or keep supply up with demand. And that's just going to continue to force prices up. He's like, it's horrible. He's like, I get it. There's a smaller pool of people who can afford $1 million house or $1.5 million or whatever the starting price is around your area. And the demographics of the people that are coming into their own that want to buy houses, there's such a large pool of them. Even a smaller cross section that can afford those houses, they still exist, and they still exist in droves. And so he showed us this whole hour-long presentation about like property values ain't going anywhere but up, except for Austin, because they saw such a bull market run. That's like the one outlier in the country. He's like, but everywhere else, man, like demographics are just destiny.
It's funny that you should say that. There's something that doesn't get said enough. The National Association of Realtors, there's another survey that's out there, and they ask buyers, why are you buying? And the top 10 reasons why a buyer buys, they're all life events. They're not buying because of tax reasons. They're not buying because it's just a good time to buy. They're buying because they're forming a house, or they're moving for a job, or they're going to have kids, or they're downsizing, or they're going to bring their parents into their house, or they want the American dream, or these are all the top 10 reasons why people buy. And if they were buying because of interest rates, it's a different story. But a lot of them did buy because of interest rates, because they were so artificially low.
Right.
I mean, I have a client I just interviewed on a house yesterday. He has a 15-year mortgage. He refinanced 4 years ago. He's at 2.4% on a 15-year. And he's like, do I sell? I mean, he wants to move. He wants to be closer to his mom in Manhattan Beach. And he's like, he's actually better off. I told him, you're better off renting. He just looked at me funny. He's like, don't you want me to sell? And I go, I want you to do what's right. And when you're ready to sell, here I am. But you're going to figure it out anyway. So I may as well tell you.
Right. And if he needs to take equity out of that house, I can help with a home equity line of credit. Brought to you by Scott. As you want. So, hey, Mike, man, I want to say thanks for being on. Anybody who's thinking about selling their house should pick up the book Seller Mistakes. I love that it just went viral and you sold a bunch of copies and got the Wall Street Journal bestseller. That's what I hope for my next book in 10 years when I decide to write another one. So, man, thanks for being on, and thanks for being so honest and transparent. It's one of the things I really respect about you.
Thanks, man. Hey, if any of your listeners are interested in it, have them email me. I'll be happy to send you a signed copy. I get author copies really inexpensively. I'd like to get the word out. I just want to get the word out. They don't have to be in Pasadena.
What's the easiest way to get in touch with you? Because there's a few Michael Bells out there.
Well, you can go to michaelbbell.com and you can find my contact information, and just pick up the phone or send me an email. I'd love to chat with you. I'd love to see if I can get you a copy of the book. That'd be great. Or if you have a loved one that's thinking about selling their house, they'd like to review it. You can also go to my website. I have the audio book on there for free. So if you feel like listening to me for 3 hours, you can download it, you can stream it, or you can watch it on YouTube. So
love it. michaelbbell.com, and we'll put
michaelbbell.com.
What's the middle name?
Bradley.
Last chance. Did a favorite movie come to mind?
No.
All right. We still love you. All right, man. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
Later, bud.